I want you to look at your wrist. I want you to look at that watch and I want you to think about how much you paid for it. Do you think you got yourself a bargain when you bought that watch? Do you think you paid the right price or did you overpay? But the question I want you to ask, the question that I'm going to try and answer today or talk about is, how much is it actually worth? Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And it is worth keeping in mind that I'm just talking about my own personal thoughts today. And I've actually got a point to this video, and I'm going to be slowly getting my way to that point. And I think it's relatively important. But it is worth knowing that I'm not in the manufacturing business, I'm not in the watch business, I'm not in the sales business. So these are just my thoughts. So please keep that in mind. But when I think about a product like a watch, there is some pretty obvious ways about thinking about what does it actually cost and why does it cost that amount. It obviously costs the raw materials of the watch, the manufacturing process, the sort of percentage of what's required to then make the watch, think about the watch, develop the watch, the business costs that are behind it, and then a profit margin that is put on top of that. That's what any product really should cost. And it's the profit margin that I'll firstly want to talk about. It's not the most important part of this video, I'm getting to that, but it's the part of this conversation that leads into what I want to talk about. Because for me, there's three types of profit margin on watches. It is a very generalized comment that I'm saying, I understand that, but in a general way, I think there's three types of profit margins for watches. First is what I consider to be micro-brand watches, especially new micro-brand watches. And I have this opinion after speaking to multiple micro-brand owners. And a lot of these first watches from micro-brands pretty much have a 0% margin on them, or close to 0%. And that is because having an affordable watch and a good value watch is a good way of sort of promoting a watch, getting people to buy it, and then start to understand the brand. There's a little bit of a margin that has been built into these prices to allow for warranty issues or unforeseen issues, but it has been surprising to me how many of the micro-brand owners that I've spoken to have said they pretty much sell them at cost, and they're certainly not talking about their own hours that they've put into them, which is why a lot of these brand new micro-brand watches that are being released are such great value. Worth keeping in mind though later on when they get a little bit more expensive, it's because they're just finally adding some profit margin. Secondly, I think there's like a set amount of profit margin. And I sort of, in my mind, sort of relate this to watches that are sort of coming out of big manufactured sort of facilities, like the Chinese watches, like watches from Aliexpress. They are getting these watches manufactured at generally a lesser price because the manufacturing costs are cheaper over there, and they're just adding a set profit margin. And they're just running it like a business that way. And then there's the idea of what I consider to be like the bigger brands. They get their watch, they develop the watch, they create the watch, and then they ask themselves the question, how much can I charge for that watch? And that's the profit margin. Yeah, okay, it's a very generalized idea of this, but I certainly know there are some big brands out there putting 1,000% profit on there, 2,000% profit on there, because they can. Now, I don't actually have anything against these companies for doing that. This is what manufacturers do and companies do. They need to make money, they need to grow, they need to build so they can create things that we can then buy. But it does then affect my sort of perception of the brand a little bit, and I feel like I'm being a little bit ripped off. And this is the point that I'm trying to get towards. It's my perception of the value of a watch, because I see so many opinions online from two points of view. Firstly, from like super affordable watches or Aliexpress watches, thinking, well, why would I buy any other watch, all these luxury expensive watches, when I can get such good value for money? And their mindset is sort of locked in on that. And I get that, I understand that. It's one of the reasons why I like these affordable watches too. And then you get this sort of almost the extreme other opinion that are in this luxury watch world, seeing the value behind the brand and the heritage, and think, why would you buy that piece of garbage from China or from some other cheaper sort of manufacturing process? Don't buy that, that's a complete waste of money when you can buy this very luxury, prestigious watch. Because their opinions about the watch, the brand, and all the other sort of surrounding information has perhaps biased their thoughts about that. So there's these two extreme watch values with these sort of biases inbuilt. And I'm talking about that in particular, this sort of bias, and trying to step away from it. Because when I look at the watch that is on my wrist, I'm not thinking about how much did it cost to make that watch? How much profit margin did the company selling that watch make? How much did the reseller then make? I'm thinking about how much is that watch worth to me? And I think that is what I'm trying to say in this video. This is the point that I'm trying to get to, finally getting to that point, is how much is the watch worth to you? And it's worth considering when you're buying a watch to try and step away from the idea of, well, how much do you think it's worth in regards to the market, or is it value for money, or is it prestige, or any of that sort of information. It's how much is that watch worth to you? And sometimes you may end up overpaying for that watch and being okay with it because it's worth that much to you. And sometimes you might get a bargain and you may feel good about yourself, and perhaps that's what it is worth to you. But it's your own personal perception of the value of that particular watch. Now, I know I've paid too much for watches in the past. I know that I've got some bargains in the past. But stepping away from that idea of what does it actually cost, and asking myself more the question of what it is worth to me, and am I willing to pay that, is more important. And I've ended up buying some watches using that idea, stepping away from that, oh, I want value for money, or I want prestige or brand recognition. Get rid of those sort of two ideas as best that I can, and more focus on myself and my relationship with that watch and understanding what that value is for me. So what is the value of that watch on your wrist? Well, it's worth whatever it is value to you. If you feel like you've been ripped off, then perhaps you've bought the wrong watch. If you feel that you've paid the right amount, perhaps you've bought the right watch. If you feel that you've got a bargain, well, I think that's good, but I think it's worth recognizing, is that the reason why you bought it? If it is, then it might not be worth the amount that it is worth. Perhaps you overpaid for it, even though it was a bargain. I doubt that that's the case, because you've probably got a good watch at a good price, and that's great as well. But this idea of what is the watch actually worth, for me, personally, it's what it is worth to me. Thanks for watching. Maybe check these videos out next.